The Cross of Father Salvador. Have you ever awakened feeling invisible eyes watching you from the darkest corner of your room? Have you felt an unexplainable chill when handling an antique object, as if the past were reaching through it to touch you? Tonight, we explore a true story from rural Mexico where a sacred relic awakened dormant evil. A holy cross symbol of protection and faith became the doorway to a nightmare no family could have imagined. Turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and prepare yourself for a tale that will make you never look at religious artifacts the same way again. The July heat pressed down on the cemetery like a hot iron as I stood beside my grandmother Guadalupe's coffin. At nearly 90 years old, she had passed peacefully, but left my mother Sophia a wooden box with strict instructions. Keep it, Sophia. You live the farthest away. Never let anyone destroy it. Never leave it in this house. I'm Valentina, 25 years old. Our family lives on the outskirts of Mexico City. My mother Sophia, my 18-year-old brother Diego, and myself. My father passed when we were young. We weren't particularly superstitious. Like most Mexicans, we held faith in God and the saints, but ghost stories were merely entertainment for late evenings. My mother taught at a local elementary school, a practical woman with little patience for the supernatural. Grandmother Guadalupe had lived in a small village in Guanajuato, dedicating her life to church service after grandfather's death. Only once did she tell us about her battle with witches in a neighboring village, a story I always assumed was fabricated to teach us about faith. In 1,983 inches, grandmother once told us, a man came to our church desperate for help. Every priest from surrounding villages had refused him. This man said his sister was possessed. I followed him to his home, a small house on a hill near the cemetery. The girl was truly possessed. She spoke strange languages, dug up graves, behaved like an animal. Women in black with white hair witches came down from the mountains each night to perform rituals with her. Grandmother never detailed how she saved the girl, only that she found an Italian priest named Father Salvador in Guanajuato, who gave her an ancient cross capable of defeating demons. "This is the most powerful weapon in my career," Father Salvador had said. "This cross has been used in hundreds of exorcisms across generations. Keep it safe and never destroy it." The moment we returned home after the funeral, my mother placed the wooden box in her wardrobe. Immediately, every light bulb in the house simultaneously exploded. Diego replaced the bulbs, while I helped Mother find a storage spot for the box. None of us recognized those explosions as an omen of what was to come. Around 2 a.m., the sound of violent retching from my mother's room woke me. Worried, I knocked on her door. "Mom, are you okay?" "Is that you, Valentina?" Her voice echoed back. "Come in." Opening the door, I found my mother trembling beneath her blankets. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. "I'm afraid, but I heard you vomiting." Just then we heard it again, thick, wet, retching sounds emanating from the wardrobe where we'd placed the box containing the cross. Without discussion, we both fled to my room, closed the door, and prayed until dawn. The next day, Mother called her sister Dolores, who still lived near grandmother's village. Dolores answered in the evening, sounding surprised. "You know, I was about to call you too. I just left the village begging to return." "What's happening with the cross?" Dolores described how after bringing the cross home, she'd seen a strange man inside her house through the window. It was an old man without a shirt skin, burned as if he'd been in the sun for days. He stood in the middle of the living room, his back to me. When I moved to see his face, it was blurred as if erased or burned, but the rest of his body was clear. Dolores said she would inquire with the local priest who had helped grandmother. Meanwhile, keep the cross safe. Have holy water on hand if possible. Over the following days, conditions in the house deteriorated. The retching, coughing, and labored breathing emanated from every corner as if someone desperately ill was hiding within the walls. Diego initially mocked our fears until one night when both Mother and I awoke to find him standing by the bed, shaking. "There's someone in my room," he whispered. "A child walked through and touched my foot." Mother gripped my hand. All three of us watched as a boy about 4 years old walked out of the room and disappeared into the hallway, softly singing as he went. We rushed downstairs, turned on all lights, and sprinkled our remaining holy water around the house, but this time it seemed ineffective. "This can't be happening," Diego said, eyes wide with terror. "It can't be real." I'd forgotten that Diego had experienced something paranormal as a child. As a toddler, my brother had a clown doll Harlequin, a gift from my mother's friend. It was a decorative doll with a porcelain frame inside. When Diego was 3, the doll became inseparable from him. He carried it everywhere, and the jingle of the doll's bells became the signal of his approach. Then one day, Diego abruptly threw the doll into the yard and refused to touch it. When asked why, he said the doll showed him its real face, a face with red eyes and a mouth full of blood, saying it wanted to eat his heart. We considered it a child's imagination until one night when Uncle Hector, who stayed with us after Father's death, ran into the yard with a shovel after seeing the doll standing outside Diego's second-floor window making strange gestures. He said when he hit it with the shovel it felt like striking flesh, not fabric or porcelain. Afterward, the doll disappeared. "It's back, isn't it?" Diego whispered. "The clown doll. It's returned because of the cross." My mother decided to do what seemed logical, get rid of the cross. She drove to a wooded area outside the city, walked among the trees, feeling someone following behind her, and eventually buried the box beneath a lightning-struck tree. "I felt someone watching me," she recounted. "But I couldn't leave it in the house anymore." Instead of improving, everything worsened. One afternoon, while home alone, I heard knocking at the gate. Looking out, I saw a tall woman with long white hair dressed in black standing before our house. My legs froze when I recognized her resemblance to the witch in grandmother's story. She peered inside, then walked around and appeared in the backyard. I ran to lock the back door, but too late she was pushing it open. I used all my strength to close it, feeling extraordinary power from the other side. The smell of earth and herbs flooded in along with heavy breathing. Inexplicably, I heard myself say, "We don't have it here. My mother buried it in the forest outside the city under a lightning-struck tree." The pressure suddenly vanished. I slammed the door shut and locked it, trembling. Looking out the window again, I saw not one but 3 black-clad women standing on the sidewalk staring at the house. Then I heard movement from Diego's downstairs bedroom, the room we'd locked and blocked with furniture. The door was opening from inside. When my brother returned, he was furious when I told him what happened. "You told them where we buried it," he shouted. I couldn't explain why those words had automatically poured from my mouth. That night we woke to the sound of bells in the house. Diego looked down the hallway from the staircase and saw a figure hopping on one leg out of the locked room, heading toward the front door. "It looked exactly like the doll," he whispered. "But human-sized," Dolores called back with news. Father Antonio, the priest who had assisted grandmother, was now an experienced cleric who insisted Dolores not worry about the cross, but when she mentioned it was now in her sister's possession, his tone changed, demanding its immediate return. It was an extremely powerful artifact, but also terrifyingly destructive. "It's an awakening object," he explained to Dolores. "It doesn't cause hauntings, it forces hidden entities to reveal themselves. The clown doll was always there, Valentina. The witches were always there. The cross just prevents them from hiding anymore." That same night, a girl knocked on Diego's friend's door. She said she'd seen Diego with Diego hanging on his back, laughing and tilting his head strangely when he looked out the window. This terrified him enough to call us immediately. Meanwhile, I was at my godmother Lucia's house, a deeply religious woman. I awoke at midnight to find her lighting candles in an empty room. "There's someone in the house," she whispered. "Something with goat horns, but human eyes and teeth." Suddenly we smelled intense sulfur and heard dragging footsteps outside the door. Looking down, I saw the doorknob glowing red-hot, as if heated in fire. Father Antonio arrived at dawn, a middle-aged man with tired eyes. Without wasting time, he took my mother to retrieve the cross, while Diego, his friend Fernando, and I stayed to guard the house. Driving to the forest, my mother sensed something wrong. "Father, do you feel like we're being watched?" Father Antonio nodded. "They know we're coming. Be careful." As they ventured deeper into the forest, they spotted a white-haired woman moving through the trees ahead. They stood silently until she disappeared. "She's looking for the cross," Father Antonio whispered. "We must hurry." Near the lightning-struck tree, they unexpectedly encountered 3 men carrying hunting rifles. "What are you doing here at this hour?" one asked, then noticed Father Antonio's white collar. "Oh, Father, sorry, we're hunting witches." "Witches?" my mother asked. "Yes," the youngest in the group said. "They come down from the mountains each night, more in the past week." With the hunters' help, they found the lightning-struck tree. While digging, my mother was horrified to see a doll's leg protrude from the earth, a bell still attached. It was Diego's clown doll, somehow buried with the cross. Father Antonio found the box containing the cross and held it up. "In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti," he said, and the air suddenly felt lighter. Meanwhile, at home, we heard Latin whisperings from outside. Diego looked out and saw 3 women on the sidewalk reciting backwards prayers. "In tenebris unum benites interprete manducare redman est nobis con eterna tenebris manducare entrata pater." Their voices echoed into the house as if from every corner of the walls. As soon as Father Antonio and Mother returned with the cross, the voices ceased. Father Antonio spent the next day performing cleansing rituals throughout the house. He refused to reveal exactly what happened with Father Salvador's cross, only saying it was an awakening object, an item with the power to awaken dormant evil entities around it. "It doesn't create hauntings," he explained. "It merely forces what's already hiding to reveal itself. The clown doll was always there, child. The witches were always there. The cross just makes them unable to hide anymore." We decided to leave the house temporarily. Before departing, Father Antonio and my mother took the cross to a convent on the other side of the city. Mother handed it to the Mother Superior. "I must warn you," Father Antonio said, "it's difficult to keep." "We will be fine," the Mother Superior replied, "and we will wait to return it when needed." That was 12 years ago. We never went back for the cross. Diego eventually married and moved to another city. My mother retired, but occasionally I still hear bells in the house late at night. Sometimes I still see a white-haired woman standing outside our gate looking in. Last week I received an email from a nun at that convent. "The Mother Superior has passed away," she wrote. "We're cleaning her room and cannot find a wooden box she mentioned in her diary. She wrote that it belongs to the family of Señora Sofia Vargas. Do you know where it might be?" I didn't reply to that email, but last night as I passed Diego's old room, I paused. The door was ajar, and from inside I heard a child's giggling. 1 week after sharing this story, I received a message from an unknown number. "I found Father Salvador's cross, and it has shown me where you live." The clown doll. Why do children often see things adults cannot? In Mexico, we have a saying, "Los niños y los locos dicen la verdad." Children and madmen tell the truth. I wish I had listened to my brother sooner. If I told you that a child's toy could harbor something ancient and hungry, would you believe me? I wouldn't have either until that doll entered our lives and turned our home into a hunting ground for something that should never have existed. Turn off your lights. Put on your headphones. And remember, sometimes the most innocent objects hide the darkest secrets. I still remember that day as if it were yesterday, Raphael's 2nd birthday. My mother organized a small party, and one of her colleagues, Mariana, came with her elderly mother, Doña Esperanza. Doña Esperanza was instantly captivated by Raphael, the way he laughed and toddled around the house on chubby legs. 3 days after the party, a package arrived, a gift from Doña Esperanza to Raphael. It was an antique clown doll made of fabric and porcelain, with a vibrant red and blue costume, a hat with tiny bells, and a white porcelain face with an odd smile. Mother placed it on the shelf in Raphael's room, thinking it too delicate for a 2-year-old to play with. I'm Camila, 12 at the time. I remember thinking the doll was creepy. Its eyes seemed to follow me as I moved across the room. But Raphael seemed to love it. He would point to it and say, "Pepito," a name none of us knew where he'd learned. 6 months later, one morning, I woke to find Raphael had taken the doll from the shelf. He cradled it in his arms, patting it like a baby. Mother decided that if Raphael liked it so much, perhaps it was safe for him to play with after all. From that moment, the doll became Raphael's inseparable companion. He took it everywhere when eating, playing, and even sleeping. The doll was only separated from Raphael during bath time, but even then he placed it right beside the tub. The jingling of bells from the clown's hat echoed throughout the house, signaling Raphael's approach. It became a family joke: wherever there were bells, there was Raphael. My father died in a car accident when I was 10 and Raphael was just 6 months old. My uncle Manuel moved in to help mother. He stayed in the downstairs guest room while Raphael's and my rooms were upstairs. Life continued normally. Raphael began talking more, and concerningly he spent much time conversing with Pepito the clown doll. Many times I heard Raphael giggling in his room and talking as if having a real conversation. "I learned new words from Pepito," Raphael told Mother one day. "Really?" Mother smiled. "What words?" Raphael began repeating words no 3-year-old should know: obscenities, curses, and even phrases in what sounded like Latin. When Raphael was 4, a disturbing change occurred. One morning we woke to find Pepito in the backyard, face down in the mud. Raphael insisted he hadn't taken the doll outside. We cleaned it and placed it back on Raphael's bed, but the next morning it was in the backyard again. This continued for several days. Each time we brought the doll back, Raphael became increasingly anxious. "Don't bring it in," he finally whispered to me. "It's not Pepito anymore." "What do you mean?" I asked. "It showed me its real face," Raphael said, eyes wide with fear. "At night when everyone was sleeping." Raphael recounted that one night he awoke to find Pepito standing at the foot of his bed, not lying beside him as usual. The doll had asked Raphael if he wanted to see its real face. In childlike curiosity, Raphael said yes. The porcelain face opened like a door. Raphael choked. And inside was another face, red eyes and a wide mouth full of blood. Raphael said the doll told him the blood was from its last meal. When Raphael asked what it ate, Pepito placed a small hand on the boy's chest and said, "Hearts." From then on, Raphael refused to sleep with the doll and continuously threw it into the yard. It became a funny game to us. No one really believed Raphael's story. We thought he was just going through a new phase or had grown tired of the old toy. One evening around 11 p.m., Uncle Manuel ran outside with a shovel, yelling and smashing at the bushes. When he returned, he was pale and shaking. "What did you see?" I asked. "Nothing," he said quickly. "Just a stray cat." But later I heard him telling Mother. He had looked through his bedroom window and seen a figure standing outside Raphael's second-floor window. At first he thought it was a burglar, but looking closer, he recognized the clown doll standing at second-floor height, making strange motions with its hands, as if trying to scare Raphael or lure him closer to the window. "I hit it with the shovel," Uncle Manuel said. "And it didn't feel like hitting fabric or porcelain. It felt like hitting flesh. And then it jumped over the wall and disappeared." After that incident, Uncle Manuel never stayed overnight again. We stored the doll in a small shed in the backyard and tried not to mention it in front of Raphael. 5 years passed. Raphael was now 9 and seemed to have forgotten about the clown doll. We still kept the shed locked tight, though none of us had checked if the doll was still there. One night I woke to loud knocking. Raphael stood there, eyes wide with fear. "It's back," he whispered. "Pepito. It's calling me from outside." I embraced Raphael and brought him to my bed. "Just a nightmare," I assured him. But then both of us heard it, the unmistakable jingle of bells from the backyard. Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. "You hear it?" Raphael whispered, cowering under the blankets. "It wants me to come out." "Stay here," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I looked out the window and saw nothing, but the jingling continued. I woke Mother and told her. She looked out her bedroom window down at the backyard. "Maybe some stray cat got into the shed," she said, though her voice didn't sound convinced. The jingling continued steadily throughout the night, and none of us could sleep. The next morning, Mother checked the shed. The lock remained intact, but when she opened it, the doll was gone. 2 weeks passed with no sign of Pepito. We began to relax. Perhaps someone had broken the lock and stolen the doll that was less frightening than the alternatives. Then one night, as I was doing homework late, I heard bells from the hallway. I opened the door and looked out. Nothing. but the jingling continued, seeming to move down the stairs. I followed the sound to the kitchen. It stopped. When I turned back to the staircase, I saw Pepito standing on the middle step staring at me. It looked older and dirtier than I remembered, and one of the bells was missing. I screamed and ran upstairs past the doll and into Raphael's room. My brother was sound asleep. I woke him and pulled him into my room, locking the door. "Pepito's on the stairs," I whispered. Raphael went pale. "You don't understand, Camila. It's been in my room all night. I've been pretending to sleep. It was standing in the corner just watching me." Soft knocking sounded at my bedroom door, followed by the jingling of bells. Tinkle, tinkle, knock, knock. "Raphael," a small, childlike voice came from the other side. "Come play with me, Raphael. I want to show you something." Mother woke from our screams. She ran to my room and the jingling disappeared. When we opened the door, the hallway was empty. We spent that night in the living room with all lights on. Raphael told Mother everything, the conversations with Pepito when he was younger, the real face behind the porcelain mask. And now its return. "It wants my heart," Raphael whispered. "It always said so." The next morning, Mother decided we would search the entire house. We checked every room, every closet, every corner. No sign of the doll. "Maybe we should call a priest," my mother suggested, though she wasn't particularly religious. "No," Raphael said. "It will know and get angry. It told me if we try to get rid of it, it will hurt all of us." That night I woke to a strange sensation, as if someone was watching me. I opened my eyes and nearly stopped breathing. Pepito was standing beside my bed, so close I could have touched it if I reached out. But it no longer resembled a doll. It was tall and distorted, its porcelain head too large for its strangely elongated body. Its colorful costume was tattered and filthy, and I could see raw red flesh where the fabric had torn. "You know, Camilla," it whispered in a voice nothing like a child's, "I still haven't eaten any hearts, but Raphael will be the first, unless you'd like to substitute for him." I tried to scream, but no sound came out. I tried to move, but my body was paralyzed. The doll moved closer, its smile cracking and stretching beyond possible limits, revealing human-like teeth behind the porcelain paint. "I'll show you my real face," it said, and its porcelain face began to crack. I woke to my own screaming. A dream. Just a dream. But when I sat up, I noticed a small bell on the pillow beside me. The following day, my mother decided to contact Doña Esperanza, the woman who had given us the doll. Mariana, Mother's colleague, gave us her phone number. "My mother passed away 2 years ago," Mariana said, sounding sad. "But if you're asking about the clown doll, I can tell you a bit about it." Mariana explained that the doll had been passed through generations in their family. It was made in Prague in the 1800s and was said to have protective powers. But it also carried a curse. "They say it was made by a clockmaker who lost his only son," she explained. "The man performed dark rituals to bring his child's soul into the doll. But instead something else came in, something ancient and hungry." Mother asked how to get rid of it. "You can't," Mariana said. "The doll always finds its way back. But you can appease it, if you give it what it wants." "And what's that?" my mother asked, though I think we both knew the answer. "A heart," Mariana said quietly. "A voluntary heart, according to a woman we spoke with. But I don't understand what that means." Mother hung up, trembling. "We're leaving," she decided. "We'll stay with Grandmother for a while." Grandmother lived in a small town 3 hours away. We locked the house and departed in the afternoon. All three of us felt relieved to leave, hoping whatever was happening would end. We stayed with Grandmother for 2 weeks, with no sign of Pepito or any other paranormal activity. Raphael began smiling again, and Mother seemed less stressed. However, when we returned home, Mother noticed something strange in the mailbox, a postcard from Prague with no message, just a picture of an antique toy shop. The first night back, I lay in bed listening for any sound, holding my breath whenever I thought I heard bells. But nothing happened. Raphael slept well, no nightmares. A week passed with no sign of the doll, then another week. We began to believe it was gone, until Uncle Manuel visited. He hadn't been to our house since the shovel incident years before. He brought his new girlfriend, Fernanda, and her young daughter, Luisa, age 6. They came for dinner. Luisa was a shy child who spoke little. She spent most of dinner staring at a corner of the room. When I asked if she was okay, she nodded. "Who is the man dressed like a clown?" she finally asked, pointing to an empty corner. The entire room went silent. Mother dropped her plate. "There's no one there, sweetheart," Fernanda said, looking worried. "Yes, there is," Luisa said. "He's been standing there the whole time. He's waving at me." Uncle Manuel took Fernanda and Luisa home immediately, promising to explain later. Raphael, Mother, and I couldn't sleep that night. We sat in the living room with all lights on. "It's still here," Raphael whispered. "It was always here." The next morning we received a call from Fernanda. Luisa had disappeared from her bed. They found her in the closet whispering to herself. When Fernanda asked what she was doing, Luisa replied, "I'm talking to my new friend. He followed me home." 2 days later, Uncle Manuel called again, panicked. Luisa had been found in the bathroom, a deep cut on her chest. She said the clown man had told her to give him her heart. Fortunately, the wound wasn't serious. But afterward, Fernanda refused to let Uncle Manuel see her or Luisa again. She said there was something wrong with our family, that we had brought something into her home. A week later, we discovered that all photos of Raphael as a small child, those with Pepito in them, had been cut. The doll's face had been carefully excised from each picture. That night I dreamed of Pepito standing by my bed again, but this time it had changed. It was no longer a doll. It was a tall, gaunt creature with abnormally long limbs and a large head. Its face was a blank white porcelain shard, no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, flat surface. "It's time, Camilla," it said, though it had no mouth. "I've waited long enough. And if not Raphael, then it will be Luisa, or perhaps you. You choose." I woke up drenched in sweat and heard Raphael screaming from his room. I ran in and found him wrestling with darkness, screaming, "It's trying to take my heart, it's trying to take my heart." Mother decided we needed professional help. She contacted a local priest, Father Eduardo, who had helped other families in similar situations. Father Eduardo came to our house the next day. He brought holy water and a cross. He spent an hour walking through the house, praying and sprinkling holy water in each room. "There is a presence here," he finally said, "but not a ghost. It's a different kind of entity, an ancient demon capable of attaching to objects. They call them object demons in Europe. They often seek children because their hearts are pure." Father Eduardo suggested performing an exorcism for the house. He warned that it would anger the entity but might force it to reveal itself so he could expel it. The ritual was conducted that evening. Father Eduardo set up a small altar in the living room and began praying in Latin. At first nothing happened. Then the temperature in the room suddenly dropped. Our breath began to appear in the air. "It's coming," Father Eduardo whispered. The jingling began soft at first, then louder. A child's laughter echoed through the room. And then, from the farthest corner of the room, a shadow began to condense. It stretched upward, forming the shape of a tall, slender figure resembling a man in a clown costume. Its face was a blank porcelain shard. "In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti," Father Eduardo called out, voice firm yet calm, raising the cross high. "Exorcizamus te omnis immundus spiritus." The black shadow shrank, deformed, and then became the familiar shape of Pepito the clown doll. It stood there small and seemingly harmless, head bowed. Father Eduardo continued praying, approaching the doll with the cross held high. Suddenly the doll's head snapped up. Its porcelain face cracked open, and from within another face appeared, a wrinkled, ancient face, with eyes like black holes and yellowed, razor-sharp teeth. "You cannot banish me, Father," it said in a voice that was both childlike and elderly. "I've been here too long. I've bonded with this place, with this family. I need a heart, and I will have it. In the name of Christ, I command you." Father Eduardo began, but the doll let out a terrible laugh and lunged forward with astonishing speed, heading straight for Raphael. I didn't think. I threw myself between the doll and my brother, feeling a sharp pain in my chest as it collided with me. My mother's scream was the last thing I heard before everything went dark. I woke in the hospital 3 days later. I had been stabbed in the chest near my heart, but thankfully the wound wasn't life-threatening. Mother and Raphael were by my bedside, both smiling when I opened my eyes. "Thank God," my mother whispered, gripping my hand. "Thank God, Pepito, the doll," I mumbled. "Gone," Raphael said, eyes bright. "Father Eduardo said that when you put yourself in danger for me, you voluntarily offered your love, not your physical heart. That love that sacrifice defeated it." Father Eduardo later explained that the entity, whatever it was, had been expelled from the house. He felt it had been weakened enough not to return, at least for many years. We decided to move afterward, both to be sure and because none of us felt comfortable in that house anymore. That was 15 years ago. I'm married now with a 3-year-old daughter named Julia. Raphael, now a successful lawyer, lives in another city, rarely visiting home. Last week, my daughter began talking about a new friend named Pepito. I thought it was just an imaginary friend, until she described him a man in colorful clown clothes, with a white face without eyes, and a hat with jingling bells. Last night, as I put Julia to bed, I heard her talking to someone in the darkness. "I can't give you my heart," she said, "but maybe my mommy will give you hers. She did it once before." I slammed the door shut and turned on all the lights. I grabbed my phone to call Father Eduardo, but before I could dial, I received a message from Raphael. "Do you hear the bells? I heard them last night. I think Pepito is back." The haunted priest. What happens when those meant to protect us from evil become its target? I met a priest in Guanajuato who had looked into hell, and hell had looked back. If I told you that faith alone isn't always enough to keep darkness at bay, would you believe me? This is the story of a man who spent his life fighting evil only to find it had followed him home. Turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and remember, sometimes those who stand against the darkness are the ones most vulnerable to it. Father Felipe sat in his small office behind the church, watching rain gently water the flowers he'd carefully tended in the garden. At 52, with salt and pepper hair and warm brown eyes, he was a respected figure in the village of San Miguel, a small community nestled in Mexico's Guanajuato region. 30 years serving the same parish had made him an integral part of the community. He knew every villager's name, had baptized most of the children, witnessed countless marriages, and comforted many families during times of loss. His office, with shelves full of theological and historical books, faded photographs from his early years at the parish, and an ancient wooden crucifix on the wall, was his quiet sanctuary. 3 months ago, Father Felipe had helped the Ortega family in Mexico City, who had contacted him after discovering a powerful ancient artifact their grandmother had left behind, Father Salvador's cross, an Italian priest who had performed numerous exorcisms. This antique, passed through generations of exorcists, had awakened dormant evil entities in their home. Father Felipe was no stranger to supernatural phenomena. As a young priest, he had participated with Doña Guadalupe, an elderly woman from the village, in an event he rarely mentioned, a ritual to free a young woman in a neighboring village who was tormented by local witches. It was the first time he truly witnessed the darkness he often preached about. It had been 3 months since his return from Mexico City, and life seemed to have returned to normal. He hadn't shared what happened with anyone, not even with Father Alejandro, his young assistant. Throughout his career, Father Felipe had faced inexplicable phenomena: weeping sounds in the empty church, the sudden scent of fresh flowers in the bitter winter cold, the feeling of being watched as he knelt alone in prayer. But these experiences had always been vague, fleeting, until recently. It began a week after his return, on a night when the first spring storm swept through the village. He woke in complete darkness, rain hammering the roof. His bedroom door, which he was certain he had locked before sleeping, stood wide open. Initially, he thought the old lock had been jarred loose by the wind, allowing the door to swing open. He closed it, locked it securely, and returned to bed. But sleep eluded him as he felt an unusual discomfort, the sensation that he was no longer alone, that someone was watching him from the dark corner of the room. Just imagination, he told himself, just after effects from the experience with the Ortega family. But when he finally drifted to sleep, he dreamed of a white-haired woman standing at the foot of his bed, staring with pupilless eyes. Each night for 2 weeks, Father Felipe woke to find his bedroom door open despite always locking it before bed. He replaced the lock-checked windows for drafts and even placed a chair before the door one night only to find both door and chair moved by morning. Father Alejandro, who lived in the rectory's living quarters, began worrying about the older priest's health. "You look tired, Father Felipe," he observed. "Are you not sleeping well?" "Just old dreams," Father Felipe lied, not wanting to worry his young assistant. But the problems weren't limited to the opening door. Papers in his office were shuffled during the night as if someone had rifled through them. Sometimes he woke and smelled damp earth and herbs, the same scent he had detected in the Ortega home. Then one night an incident occurred that made him unable to deny something was wrong. He woke hearing prayers, female voices softly reciting the rosary. At first he thought perhaps some women from the village had come early to the church for morning prayers, though it was still pitch dark. He donned his robe and walked down the long corridor leading to the main church. When he opened the door connecting the rectory and church, the prayers stopped abruptly. The church was cloaked in darkness, illuminated only by the eternal candle near the altar and the weak moonlight filtering through stained glass windows. Father Felipe took a candle from the table beside the door and lit it. As the light spread, he saw a sight that froze his heart: about a dozen women seated scattered among the pews, all wearing black with head coverings obscuring their faces. They sat in complete silence and stillness, but he felt every pair of eyes directed at him. "Hello?" he called, his voice echoing in the empty space. "I didn't know the church was open. Can I help you?" No answer, just heavy silence. Father Felipe swallowed hard, feeling goosebumps across his body. He moved closer, raising the candle higher to see better. As he approached the first pew, he realized the woman sitting there was staring straight ahead, not moving a muscle. He couldn't see her full face under the covering, but something about her skin and bone structure made him shudder. It didn't resemble the skin of a living person. "In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit," he began making the sign of the cross toward the women. Immediately a collective exhale sounded from all of them, as if they had been holding their breath and only now were allowed to breathe. The nearest woman slowly turned her head toward him, the covering slipping enough to reveal part of her face skin, pale as a corpse, eyes completely black, without whites, and a cold smile with teeth too sharp for a woman. Father Felipe backed away, dropping the candle. In the dark moment before the flame extinguished, he saw all faces turned toward him, all with the same unnatural smile. The next morning, Father Alejandro found Father Felipe kneeling before the altar, exhausted and pale. He had spent the entire night in prayer, not daring to leave the safety of the sanctuary. "Father Felipe, what's wrong?" Father Alejandro asked, concerned about his mentor's state. Father Felipe considered recounting what he had witnessed, but decided against it. How could he explain what he'd seen without sounding delusional? Just a sleepless night. He answered, his voice hoarse. "I need coffee. Lots of coffee." Father Felipe didn't sleep that night. He stayed in his office researching ancient demonology books he'd collected over the years. He searched for information about the phenomena he was experiencing: the opening doors, the women in the church, the undeniable presence he felt watching him. A passage in an old Latin book caught his attention. "Strige congregant in sanctis locis simulantes pietatem sed querentes animas. Signum eorum est oculi sine luce dentes luporum et odor terrae." Witches gather in holy places, feigning piety but seeking souls. Their sign is eyes without light, wolf's teeth, and the smell of earth. These lines chilled him. They described exactly what he had seen and smelled. But why were they here? Why now? The painful truth gradually dawned on him. Father Salvador's cross. By helping the Ortega family, he had attracted the witches' attention. They had followed him from Mexico City. As the night progressed, Father Felipe battled fear and exhaustion. He knew he couldn't avoid sleep forever, but he dreaded what might happen if he closed his eyes. Finally, as dawn approached, fatigue won, and he drifted to sleep at his desk. He dreamed he stood on a hill near the village where he often walked to meditate. Before him, a white-haired woman stood with her back to him. The wind blew her hair, obscuring her face. "Why have you come here?" he asked in the dream. "Well, why do you trouble me?" The woman slowly turned, Her face was hidden by hair, but he could see her smile, the same unnatural smile as the women in the church. "We come for what belongs to us," she said, her voice like wind whispering through dry grass. "The cross. It belongs to us." "I don't have it," Father Felipe protested. "It's in Mexico City in a convent." The woman moved closer, her hair moving like white snakes. "You used it. You connected with it. And now you will lead us to it." She reached out, nails long and sharp. Father Felipe wanted to run, but his legs were frozen. As her fingers nearly touched his cheek, he jerked awake. He was no longer in his office. He stood on the hill from his dream, the sun rising in the east. A cold wind blew through, and he realized he was still in his nightclothes, barefoot on the cold ground. He had sleepwalked out of the rectory, through the village, and up the hill, a distance of over a mile. "My God," he whispered, legs trembling. "My God, help me." From his position, he could see the entire village below, with the church tower rising among the small houses. As he watched, he noticed movement catching his eye, a line of black-clad women leaving the church like a black ant line, moving toward the edge of the village and disappearing into the forest. He returned to the village with a new sense of urgency. He needed to contact the convent in Mexico City to warn them. He needed to know the cross was still safe. When Father Felipe reached the rectory, Father Alejandro was waiting with a worried expression. "Where did you go? I've been looking everywhere." "I went for a walk," Father Felipe lied. "I needed to clear my mind." "In your nightclothes?" Father Alejandro asked, frowning. "Father Felipe, what's going on?" Father Felipe knew he couldn't keep the secret forever. With a sigh, he led Father Alejandro into his office and told him about Father Salvador's cross, about the Ortega family, and about the strange women in the church. "I don't know if they're really witches," he concluded, "but they're not normal people, and they want the cross." Father Alejandro, always practical and somewhat skeptical, didn't seem to know what to do with this story. "Do you think this might be stress?" he asked gently. "You've been working too hard lately." "I know it sounds incredible," Father Felipe admitted, "but what I need to do now is call the convent and ensure the cross is still safe." He called the convent immediately, but no one answered. He tried again multiple times throughout the day, each time met with concerning silence on the other end. That night, Father Felipe decided not to sleep alone. He asked Father Alejandro to stay with him in his office, and they took turns keeping watch while the others slept. Around 3 a.m. While Father Felipe was drifting into brief sleep, and Father Alejandro was reading, a knock sounded at the door, soft but definite. Father Alejandro looked at Father Felipe, who had awakened instantly. "Who could be coming at this hour?" he whispered. "Don't open the door," Father Felipe warned, but too late. Father Alejandro, with his instinct to help, had already stood and was heading toward the front door of the rectory. Father Felipe followed behind, heart pounding. As Father Alejandro opened the door outside, there was only darkness, no one there. "Strange," Father Alejandro muttered, peering out. "I was sure I heard." A cold wind blew in, carrying the smell of damp earth and herbs, and then Father Felipe heard it, the whisper of many female voices coming from the darkness. "In tenebris unum benites interprete manducare redman est nobis con eterna tenebris manducare entrata pater." "Close the door," Father Felipe shouted, pulling Father Alejandro inside and slamming the door shut. "They're here. They're reciting backwards prayers, invocations, calling demons." Father Alejandro, finally beginning to believe something truly was happening, helped him secure the door. They moved through the rectory, closing and locking every entrance and window, lighting every candle and lamp. The whispering continued outside, seemingly coming from all directions. Occasionally they heard knocking on windows, on walls, on the roof, as if dozens of women were surrounding the house seeking entry. Father Felipe and Father Alejandro retreated to the small chapel within the rectory, taking holy water and crucifixes. They knelt and began to pray, their voices trying to drown out the whispering and knocking from outside. When dawn finally arrived, the whispering and knocking gradually faded. Father Felipe and Father Alejandro, exhausted and trembling, ventured to look out the window. No sign of the black-clad women, just an ordinary spring morning with birds singing and the sun rising. "Do you think they're gone?" Father Alejandro asked, voice hoarse from exhaustion and fear. Only until tonight, Father Felipe answered heavily. They'll return. They'll keep returning until they get what they want. Father Alejandro, who had experienced the most terrifying night of his life, suggested they should call the bishop, report what happened, and request assistance. Father Felipe agreed, but with less hope that any authority figure would believe their story. The bishop, a practical 65-year-old man with deep faith in doctrine, but little experience with supernatural phenomena, listened to their account with obvious skepticism. Father Felipe, the bishop, said, I know you are a good priest with a sincere heart, but you have been under a lot of stress lately. Perhaps you need rest, maybe a retreat. Your Excellency, I am not tired or delusional, Father Felipe insisted. Father Alejandro also heard and saw what I did. Father Alejandro, though still shocked, confirmed the story. The bishop sighed. Very well. I will send Father Ignacio to you. He has experience with these sensitive matters. Meanwhile, continue to pray and keep your faith strong. Father Ignacio, a tall, thin, 70-year-old priest with piercing blue eyes, arrived that afternoon. He was known in the diocese for his extensive knowledge of demonology and had participated in several exorcisms. After listening to Father Felipe's account, Father Ignacio nodded gravely. I've heard about Father Salvador's cross. It has a complicated history. What do you mean? Father Felipe asked. The cross is not merely an instrument in exorcism rituals, Father Ignacio explained. It's an attracting object, something that dark entities feel compelled to seek and destroy. Father Salvador used it as a kind of bait in his rituals. Bait? Father Alejandro asked. To force demons to manifest, Father Ignacio said. This makes it extremely powerful but also extremely dangerous. And now these witches, or whatever they are, want to find and destroy it. They think you know where it is, Father Felipe. Father Felipe described his dream on the hill and what the white-haired woman had said to him. Father Ignacio frowned. They've established a connection with you. When you helped the Ortega family, you became part of the cross's history, and now they can follow you through that connection. How do I sever that connection? Father Felipe asked. We need to perform a cleansing ritual, Father Ignacio said, for both you and the church. But I must warn you, they will resist. They won't give up easily. They decided to perform the ritual that night before the black-clad women could return. Father Ignacio took from his bag a small wooden box filled with items: blessed salt, holy water from the Vatican sacred oil, and a silver crucifix. As dusk fell, the three priests began the ritual, starting from the small chapel and working outward. Father Ignacio sprinkled holy water and scattered salt, reciting prayers in Latin, while Father Felipe and Father Alejandro responded. They moved through each room of the rectory, anointing doors and windows. When they completed the work in the rectory, they proceeded to the main church. The evening light filtered through the stained glass windows, creating red and blue streaks on the stone floor. The church was empty and quiet, but Father Felipe could feel tension in the air, as if the building itself was holding its breath, waiting. They began the ritual at the back of the church, working their way toward the altar. When they were halfway through, wind began to rise outside. A storm was approaching, bringing dark clouds and lightning. They know what we're doing, Father Ignacio said quietly. Continue. As they approached the altar, the temperature in the church suddenly dropped. Their breath began to condense in the air. The candles on the altar, which had been burning brightly, abruptly extinguished, and then they heard it, the whispering, at first very faint, then growing louder. Not from outside this time, but from within the church itself. From the shadows behind pillars, from wall niches and hidden corners, figures began to appear, the black-clad women with head coverings. Continue the ritual, Father Ignacio commanded, his voice steady despite his pale face. Don't stop for anything. They advanced to the altar, where Father Ignacio opened the vial of sacred oil to anoint it. But before he could do so, the whispering suddenly ceased. An unnatural silence enveloped the church. And then from the shadows behind the altar, a figure stepped forward, a tall woman with long white hair flowing loose. She wasn't dressed in black like the others, but wore a long white dress to her feet, ancient and yellowed. Her face was hidden by hair, but through the strands, Father Felipe could see the black eyes and the sharp-toothed smile. "Father Felipe," she said, her voice like bones grinding together, "we found it, your cross. We thank you for guiding us to it." "I did nothing," Father Felipe replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Oh, but you did," the woman said, taking a step closer. "You thought about it. You dreamed about it. You worried about it. And those thoughts are the paths we follow like threads in the darkness." Father Ignacio stepped forward, raising his silver crucifix. "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you." The woman made a dismissive gesture with her hand, and Father Ignacio was thrown backwards, crashing against a pillar and slumping to the floor. "Your prayers are weak, old priest," she mocked. "Not like our prayers." The black-clad women began moving forward, closing the circle around the three priests. They resumed their whispering, but louder, now clearer, not Latin, but something more ancient, filled with guttural and sibilant sounds. Father Alejandro rushed to Father Ignacio, who was trying to sit up, dazed. Father Felipe stood alone, facing the white-haired woman. "Stop," he said. "The cross doesn't belong to you. It belongs to us more than it belongs to you priests," the woman countered. "We were there when it was created. We witnessed the first blood spilled on it." With lightning-quick movement, she reached out and grabbed Father Felipe's wrist. Her hand was cold as ice and hard as bone, and when she touched him, excruciating pain shot up his arm as if his skin was being burned. "You will help us destroy it," she whispered, "as you helped us find it." Suddenly, Father Felipe understood. He remembered the nights waking to find his door open, the dreams about the cross, and the horrifying thought that he had unwittingly led these creatures to the convent through his very thoughts and nightmares. Taking advantage of his distraction, the woman drew closer, her white hair swirling around like living snakes. She pulled the hair back from her face, revealing her full face for the first time. It was not the face of an elderly woman. It was a mask of human skin stretched over a non-human bone structure, with entirely black eyes and a mouth too wide filled with needle-sharp teeth. "You're not human," Father Felipe whispered. "We once were," the creature replied, its mouth not syncing with the words, "long before your God, and we will exist long after he is forgotten." Father Felipe felt fear rising in his chest, but with it came something else, a deep resolve and unshakable faith. He had served God all his life. He would not let these creatures win. "In nomine Patris," he began, his voice soft but steady, "et Filii et Spiritus Sancti." The creature tightened its grip on his wrist nails, digging into his flesh. "Meaningless words," it growled. "Pater noster qui es in caelis," he continued, voice growing stronger. "Sanctificator nomen tuum." The black-clad women began to hiss a sound like metal scraping against metal. They started backing away as if the prayer caused them pain. Father Ignacio, having recovered enough to stand with Father Alejandro's help, began joining in the prayer, his voice merging with Father Felipe's. Father Alejandro also joined, creating a chorus of faith against the darkness. The white-haired woman shrieked in anger, releasing Father Felipe's wrist and backing away. Her face began to distort, the skin stretching and tearing, revealing something underneath that was not human. "You cannot stop us," she screamed, her voice now deep and echoing as from a cave. "The cross will be destroyed, and we will come back for you, Father Felipe." With a final scream of rage, the creature and the black-clad women rapidly dissolved into the darkness like smoke blown away by wind. The church doors burst open and a strong wind blew through, carrying the smell of rain and fresh air. The storm had passed, and with it the terrifying presence had vanished. The three priests collapsed, exhausted and shaking, but alive and safe. "What was that?" Father Alejandro asked, voice hoarse with fear. "Something ancient," Father Ignacio answered, wiping sweat from his brow. "Something from a darker time when faith was weak and darkness reigned." "They've found the cross," Father Felipe said, looking at the wound on his wrist, a burn in the shape of a hand. "I need to call the convent." The next morning, Father Felipe finally connected with the convent. The news was not good. 2 days earlier, the convent had experienced a mysterious fire, No one was injured, but many valuable items were lost, including a wooden box containing an ancient cross. "I'm sorry, Father Felipe," the Mother Superior said over the phone. "We don't know how the fire started, and we don't know who took the cross." After the call, Father Felipe sat in silence for a long while, looking out his office window at his garden. The wound on his wrist still ached, a reminder of the reality of what had happened. "What will you do now?" Father Ignacio asked. He had decided to stay a few more days to ensure the church was safe. "I will continue," Father Felipe answered simply. "I will serve my parish. I will pray, and I will prepare." "Prepare for what?" "For when they return," Father Felipe said, looking into Father Ignacio's eyes. "And they will return, maybe not tomorrow or next year, but someday. That creature said they were once human long before there was a God." "I think there's something very ancient, Father Ignacio, something the church has fought for centuries." Father Ignacio nodded heavily. "I will report to the bishop. He needs to know what we've faced." 2 weeks later, life in San Miguel seemed to have returned to normal. Father Ignacio had returned to his parish, and Father Alejandro appeared to have recovered from the terrifying experience, though he now slept with the lights on. Father Felipe continued his work, serving the community, hearing confessions, celebrating Mass, and tending his garden. The wound on his wrist had healed, leaving a scar in the shape of a hand. On a quiet evening, as he knelt in his small chapel for end-of-day prayers, he felt a presence behind him. He turned and saw a little girl standing at the door, about 8 years old, wearing a simple white dress. She had long black hair and dark eyes. "Do you need help, child?" he asked gently. He didn't recognize the girl, but there were many new families in the village. "Father Felipe?" the girl asked, her voice sweet and clear. "Yes, that's me," he replied with a smile. The girl smiled back, and in the flickering candlelight her smile seemed a bit too wide, her teeth a bit too sharp than they should be. "They said I should tell you," the girl said, "that they're still searching and they're still waiting, and they send you this gift." The girl reached out her hand, holding a small object. When she opened her palm, Father Felipe saw a small piece of wood, partially blackened, a fragment of Father Salvador's cross. Before he could react, the girl turned and ran out, her laughter echoing down the empty hallway. Father Felipe gave chase, but when he reached the church door, the girl had vanished into the darkness. He returned to the chapel, staring at the charred wood piece on the altar. A clear message: the battle wasn't over. That night, when Father Felipe finally fell into uneasy sleep, he dreamed he stood on the familiar hill. The white-haired woman stood there, her back to him. And this time, when she turned, he didn't see her face anymore. He saw his own. The following day, an emergency call came from the convent reporting that a little girl had been found in the courtyard, dead, with a charred piece of wood in her hand. No one in the convent had ever seen the child before, and no one knew where she came from. The only thing they were certain of: she had been dead at least a week before being found. The brother's girlfriend's house. Do you know that fear can spread like a contagion? In psychiatric medicine, they call it mass hysteria. But what happens when it's not fear but evil that's spreading? If I told you that a malevolent entity could attach itself to a person like a parasite, following them from home to home, would you believe me? I wouldn't have either, until I witnessed a darkness that refused to stay confined to one family, one house, one victim. Turn off your lights, put on your headphones, and remember, when you invite someone into your home, you never know what they might bring with them. The Mendoza family had always been the model of a normal, happy Mexican household. Roberto, the 43-year-old father, worked at a local construction company. Patricia, the 40-year-old mother, was a beloved elementary school teacher. Their oldest daughter, Isabella, 19, studied at the university in the city. Their middle child, Marco, 16, was a high school student and promising soccer player. And their youngest, Elena, 7, was a cheerful, intelligent child who loved drawing and storytelling. They lived in a small but comfortable house in the suburbs of Mexico City, with a tiny backyard, 3 cats, and a life full of love. Nothing in their daily existence suggested they would soon become victims of an unimaginable nightmare. It all began when Marco started dating Adriana Fuentes, a classmate. Adriana was an excellent student, beautiful, with long black hair and a radiant smile. The Mendoza family immediately took to her, and she became a regular guest in their home. Similarly, Marco frequently visited Adriana's house, where her family welcomed him warmly. "He's a good boy," Adriana's mother Beatrice often told friends. "Very polite and respectful, and they look so adorable together." Beatrice and Patricia became close, often calling each other to talk about the children, share recipes, and chat about life. Elena was especially delighted whenever Marco brought Adriana home, as Adriana always made time to play with her, helping her draw or telling engaging stories. Marco and Adriana had been dating for 8 months when their relationship began to turn serious. They talked about the future, about possibly attending the same university, and even joked about getting married someday. Both families found their relationship endearing, if somewhat naive. However, none of them knew that this sweet relationship would bring something dark and toxic into their lives. Something that had been lurking in Marco's house for years, waiting for an opportunity to escape and find new victims. One Friday evening, Marco was invited to Adriana's house for dinner with her family. Nothing unusual about the evening. Roberto, Adriana's father, barbecued meat on the terrace, while Beatrice prepared side dishes in the kitchen. Javier, Adriana's 12-year-old brother, was at a friend's house and would return later. Dinner proceeded cheerfully with laughter and familiar conversation. Marco, who usually felt comfortable here, seemed tense today. He kept looking around the room, occasionally starting at small sounds. "What's wrong, son?" Roberto asked, noticing Marco's nervousness. "Nothing, sir," Marco replied, but his eyes kept darting toward the hallway leading to Javier's room. After dinner, while Roberto and Beatrice cleared the dishes, Adriana pulled Marco outside to the yard. "You're not okay," she said, not a question but an observation. "What's going on?" Marco hesitated, clearly struggling with whether to share something. Finally he sighed. "You'll think I'm crazy." "Never," Adriana said, taking his hand. "I know you, Marco. What's happening?" "Lately, there have been some strange things happening at my house." He began, his voice so low that Adriana had to lean forward to hear. "Noises, objects moving, and I think I've seen something." "Seen what?" Adriana asked, raising an eyebrow. "A doll," Marco whispered, "or something that looks like a doll, but it moves. I know that sounds." "You're talking about a ghost," Adriana interrupted, her voice slightly skeptical but not mocking. "I don't know," Marco admitted, "but it's driving me crazy. I can't sleep. I always feel like someone's watching me." Adriana squeezed his hand, genuinely concerned. "I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I believe you. If you say you saw something, then something's there." Marco smiled gratefully, clearly relieved to share the burden. "Thank you. I don't know what to do. My mom believes, but she's scared too. They called a priest, but it didn't help." "Maybe you should stay here tonight," Adriana suggested. "Here with us, away from whatever's happening at your house." Marco nodded, grateful for the offer. What neither of them knew was that by coming here tonight, Marco had unwittingly brought something from his house, something that had attached to him, waiting for an opportunity to find new victims. After Marco went home around midnight, Beatrice, Adriana's mother, couldn't sleep. She felt strange, restless, as if something wasn't right. After tossing and turning, she decided to go to the kitchen for some herbal tea. As she passed Javier's room, she heard sounds inside, as if someone was walking around. She stopped listening. Javier should have returned from his friend's house at 10 p.m. and gone to bed, but the sounds were like someone pacing around the room, footsteps light but distinct. "Javier," she called softly, knocking on the door. "Are you still up?" No answer, but the sound stopped immediately. Beatrice hesitated, then slowly opened the door. The room was dark, but light from the hallway allowed her to see Javier sound asleep on the bed. No one else was in the room, nothing unusual. Beatrice shook her head. "I must have imagined it," she told herself, closing the door gently and continuing to the kitchen. In the kitchen, she boiled water and prepared tea. As she stood there waiting for the water to boil, she had the odd feeling she was being watched. She turned, looking into the darkness of the adjacent living room, but saw nothing. Yet the feeling persisted, an invisible presence observing. After drinking her tea, Beatrice returned to bed, finally falling into uneasy sleep. She dreamed she was walking down a long, dark hallway following a child dressed in a colorful clown costume. The child never turned around, but Beatrice knew in the way one knows in dreams that if it did turn, its face would not be a child's face. She jerked awake when Roberto shook her. "Are you all right?" he asked, worried. "You were screaming in your sleep." "A nightmare," she mumbled, cold sweat running down her back. "Just a nightmare." But as she looked out the bedroom window into the backyard, her heart froze. The family's 3 cats were standing in the yard, motionless, all staring up at the roof. Beatrice went to the window, trying to see what was attracting the cats' attention. Through the reflection in the glass, she caught a glimpse of a figure sitting on the roof, a figure that looked like a child in a colorful clown costume. When she turned back to point it out to Roberto, the figure had vanished. The next day, Beatrice recounted her strange experience to the family at breakfast. "It felt like someone was in the house," she said, "and the cats were acting very strangely." Javier shrugged. "I didn't hear anything. I slept like a log." Adriana, however, looked worried. "Marco said there have been some strange things happening at his house. He thinks it's ghosts." Roberto laughed, but his laugh lacked joy. "Ghosts, son, we don't believe in such things." "Marco isn't superstitious," Adriana replied. "He's genuinely scared, Dad." "So what did he see?" Javier asked, suddenly interested. "Some kind of doll," he said, Adriana answered. "An old clown doll." Beatrice dropped her coffee mug, shattering it on the kitchen floor. Everyone turned to look at her. "Mom?" Adriana asked. "Are you okay?" "Fine," Beatrice said, though she had gone pale. "It's just, in my dream last night I saw a child dressed as a clown." A heavy silence descended on the kitchen. Finally, Roberto broke it. "It's just a coincidence," he said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "Let's forget about ghosts. We have a busy day ahead." But fear had begun to take root. When Adriana went to school, she received a message from Marco saying he wasn't feeling well and wouldn't be coming to school. She called him during lunch break, concerned. "I told my family about what you said," she admitted. "And Mom had a strange dream last night about a child dressed as a clown." Marco was silent for a long moment. "That's not good, Adriana," he finally said. "Not good at all. You think it could go from your house to mine?" "I don't know," Marco answered. "But please be careful. Don't be alone, and especially watch out for Elena." "Elena, your sister, why?" "Because this thing likes children," Marco said, voice hoarse with fear. "I'll explain later. Just promise me you'll be careful." That day when Adriana returned home, Javier was playing video games in his room, the door open. She glanced in as she passed and froze. There was a shadow standing in the corner of the room, tall, slender, with a strangely large head. But when she looked closer, there was nothing there. "Javier," she called, heart pounding. "What?" he answered, not taking his eyes off the screen. "Nothing," she said, continuing to her room, the unsettling feeling persisting. That night, as the family watched TV in the living room, Elena, Marco's 7-year-old sister, suddenly pointed to an empty corner of the room. "Who is the man dressed like a clown?" she asked, head tilted curiously. "There's no one there, sweetheart," Beatrice said, but her voice trembled. "Yes, there is," Elena insisted. "He's been standing there the whole time. He's waving at me." Roberto and Beatrice exchanged worried glances. Javier put down the controller, suddenly disinterested in his game. Adriana felt a chill run down her spine. "What does he look like?" she asked her little sister. "Tall," Elena answered simply, "with a sad white face. And he wears colorful clothes with little bells." Roberto decided to put Elena to bed early while Beatrice called Marco to ask more about what was happening. Marco explained that the clown doll, which his family called Pepito, had once been his favorite toy as a child until it showed him its real face, a face with red eyes and a mouth full of blood saying it wanted to eat his heart. Since then, it had haunted the family years ago before disappearing, only to recently return after Marco's grandmother's death. "It didn't bother us for years," Marco explained, "but recently it came back. And now, I'm afraid it's followed me to your house." Beatrice felt a deep primal fear. She had always been practical, not believing in ghosts or supernatural phenomena. But now faced with Marco's words and what she had experienced, she began to doubt. "What should we do?" she asked, voice small. "I don't know," Marco admitted. "But make sure Elena is never alone. It likes children. It tried to show me its real face when I was a child. I don't know exactly what it wants, but it's not good." After hanging up, Beatrice related the conversation to Roberto. He looked skeptical but clearly worried. "Ghosts," he muttered. "I can't believe we're talking about this." "Then how do you explain what Elena saw?" Beatrice asked. "My dream, the cats." Roberto had no answer. That night they checked on Elena frequently, anxious for the child's safety. Each time they opened the door, they found her sleeping peacefully safe. Around 3 a.m., Beatrice woke with an irresistible thirst. She went downstairs for water. Returning, she passed the bathroom and heard small voices. "Elena," she called, knocking on the door. "Are you in there?" No answer, but the voices stopped. Beatrice tried the door, but it was locked from inside. "Elena," she called louder, beginning to pound on the door. "Open the door!" Roberto woke from the noise and ran over. "What's happening?" "Elena is in the bathroom and the door is locked," Beatrice said, panicking. "She's not answering." Roberto began pounding on the door. "Elena, sweetheart, open the door!" Suddenly they heard a scream from inside, an agonizing, horrific scream from Elena. Without hesitation, Roberto backed up and kicked the door, breaking the lock. Inside, they found Elena standing before the mirror, a kitchen knife in hand, a deep cut on her chest. Blood was flowing down her pink nightgown. "I have to give him my heart," she said, her voice oddly monotone. "He said I have to give him my heart." Beatrice screamed and rushed to her daughter, taking the knife from her hands. Roberto lifted Elena up and ran downstairs, shouting to Adriana and Javier, who were awakening from the noise. "Call an ambulance now." Fortunately, Elena's wound wasn't as serious as it appeared. The knife had cut through skin, but not deep enough to cause serious harm. At the hospital, when asked why she did it, Elena said the clown man told her to give him her heart. "He said that if I didn't, he would take Adriana's heart instead," the child cried. "I didn't want him to hurt Adriana." The doctors suggested a psychological evaluation, suggesting Elena might be experiencing a form of delusional disorder. But Roberto and Beatrice knew better. They called Marco's mother, Claudia, to share what had happened. "My God!" Claudia gasped upon hearing the news. "I'm so sorry. I'm so very sorry. We never thought it could move like that." Beatrice was standing in the hospital hallway where they would keep Elena overnight for observation. "Why is it doing this? What does it want?" "It wants a heart," Claudia answered, her voice shaking. "A voluntary heart, according to a woman we spoke with. But I don't understand what that means." When Beatrice returned to Elena's room, she found Roberto coming out pale and trembling. "What's wrong?" she asked. "An elderly nurse just went into the room," he said. "But when I asked her what she was doing, she turned around and what?" "It wasn't a nurse," Roberto whispered. "Not a human. The face, no eyes, just black holes. And the teeth, too many teeth." They rushed into Elena's room, but the child was still sleeping soundly, safe and alone. No sign of a nurse or anyone else. When they returned home the next day with Elena discharged, but still needing rest, they discovered Javier acting strangely. He sat in his room staring at a corner of the wall, whispering to himself. "Javier," Roberto called, standing at the door. "Who are you talking to?" Javier slowly turned his eyes, strangely empty. "To my new friend," the boy said. "He followed me home." Adriana, standing behind Roberto, felt her heart pound. "What friend, Javier?" "The clown man," Javier answered simply. "He said he tried with Elena, but she was too small. So now he wants to try with me. He wants to show me his real face." The family decided not to leave Javier alone. They took turns watching him even when he protested that he was old enough for privacy. Beatrice called a local priest, Father Martin, who came immediately. He sprinkled holy water throughout the house and prayed in each room, but there was no sign that the clown man had departed. That night, when Roberto and Beatrice had fallen asleep, Adriana kept watch over Javier. The boy had drifted to sleep, but restlessly mumbling and tossing. Adriana, fighting sleep, suddenly heard a small sound bells jingling coming from under Javier's bed. Tinkle, tinkle, tinkle. Her heart pounding, she knelt down and looked under the bed. At first she saw nothing but darkness, but as her eyes adjusted, she saw a shape huddled in the farthest corner, a small shape child-sized, but not a child. It realized it had been spotted and began to move, not crawling, but moving spider-like, its limbs, bending at angles impossible for a human. And as it moved, Adriana saw its face, a white porcelain mask with a painted smile, but cracks in the surface revealed something red and wet underneath. Adriana screamed and backed away. Javier jerked awake, and Roberto and Beatrice rushed into the room. "It's under the bed," Adriana cried, pointing. "The doll." Roberto immediately knelt and looked, but there was nothing there. He pulled out a few old toys, a pair of shoes and a box, but no sign of the doll. "There's nothing there, Adriana," he said, looking concerned. "Are you sure you saw—" "I saw it," she insisted. "It moved like a spider, and its face—" It was breaking open. "She's tired," Beatrice said, embracing Adriana. "We all are, maybe—" She was interrupted by a scream from the bathroom, Elena's scream. They all ran there, where they found Elena standing before the mirror, trembling. "He's there," she whispered, pointing behind herself in the mirror. "He's standing right behind me." But when they looked in the mirror, they only saw their own reflections. The events of that night made Beatrice come to a difficult decision. She called Marco the next morning. "I'm sorry," she said, "but I can't let you near my daughter anymore." "What?" Marco gasped. "But why? I can help. I know about the doll." "That's exactly why," Beatrice interrupted, her voice cold with fear. "Something followed you from your house, Marco. Something that nearly killed my daughter. I'm sorry, but this is the last time we'll speak." She hung up, ignoring Marco's pleas. Adriana, who had overheard the conversation, burst into the living room, tears streaming. "You can't do that," she cried. "Marco isn't to blame." "Adriana, you don't understand," Beatrice said, her voice soft but firm. "This thing, whatever it is, it followed him here. It hurt Elena. It's trying to hurt Javier. I can't risk any more." "But—" "No arguments," Roberto interjected, his voice leaving no room for negotiation. "Your mother is right. We're lucky Elena is still alive. I won't gamble with my children's lives anymore." Adriana ran out sobbing. Beatrice understood the girl was in love with Marco, that this would break her heart. But as a mother, she had to put her children's safety first. In the following days, the tension and fear in the family escalated. Adriana refused to speak to her parents. Javier continued acting strangely, talking to empty corners, and waking with unexplained scratches on his arms and legs. Elena, still recovering from her wound, clung to Beatrice, refusing to be alone even for a few minutes. They tried everything to rid themselves of the entity. Father Martin returned multiple times to bless the house and pray. They consulted a local psychic who burned herbs and placed protective crystals around the house. They even contacted amateur ghost hunters who spent a night in the house with their equipment but found nothing conclusive. Nothing worked. The clown man remained hiding in the shadows, waiting. One night, 2 weeks after the incident with Elena, Javier disappeared from his bed. They found him in the garage, standing on a chair with a rope around his neck, attached to a beam in the ceiling. Roberto arrived just in time to stop him, pulling him down as he was about to kick the chair away. When asked why, Javier, with empty eyes and a monotone voice, simply said, "He wants a voluntary heart. He said it would end." He said it's the only way to save Elena and Adriana. They took Javier to the hospital, where doctors sedated him and suggested inpatient psychiatric treatment. Roberto and Beatrice agreed, hoping he would be safer there. Returning home with only Adriana and Elena, they felt desperate. The house, once their safe haven, now felt like a prison, a place where they were trapped with an entity they couldn't see or fight. "What are we going to do?" Beatrice whispered to Roberto one night after the girls had gone to bed. "Javier is in the hospital. Elena still has nightmares. Adriana hates us, and that thing is still here waiting." "Maybe we should leave," Roberto suggested. "Sell the house, move, start again somewhere else." "You think that would work? If it could follow Marco here, couldn't it follow us to a new place?" Roberto had no answer. A sudden noise from upstairs startled them both. A scream followed by a loud crash. They rushed upstairs, hearts pounding, and ran to Elena's room. The door was locked. They could hear Elena's crying inside and shuffling footsteps. Roberto began pounding on the door. Elena, open the door! No answer, just interrupted crying and shuffling sounds. Roberto backed up and began kicking the door 1, 2, 3 times before it broke open. Inside, they saw Elena standing on the bed, cowering in fear. Standing in the middle of the room was Adriana holding a kitchen knife. "Adriana!" Beatrice screamed. "What are you doing?" Adriana slowly turned and they saw her eyes, completely black eyes with no whites. "Adriana isn't here anymore." A voice came from her mouth, but it wasn't her voice. It was a deep, echoing voice with a metallic undertone. "Gabriel is here, and Gabriel wants a heart." Adriana, or the entity controlling her, took a step toward Elena. Roberto, without hesitation, lunged forward and tackled Adriana, pinning her to the floor. The knife flew from her hand, and Beatrice quickly pulled Elena from the bed and out of the room. "Run!" Roberto shouted, wrestling to hold Adriana, who was struggling wildly. "Get Elena out of here!" Beatrice didn't wait to be told twice. She grabbed Elena tightly and ran downstairs, out the front door, and to the car. With shaking hands, she inserted the key and started the engine. Just as she was about to drive away, the front door of the house burst open and Roberto ran out, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. He jumped into the passenger seat, and Beatrice drove away immediately. "Adriana," he gasped. "It's taken her. We need help," Beatrice said, tears streaming down her face as she drove too fast through the empty streets. "We need someone who understands these things." "Marco," Elena whispered from the back seat. "Marco knows about it." Roberto and Beatrice exchanged glances. They had pushed Marco away, blamed him for all of this. They had cut him off when they believed he was the source of their troubles. But perhaps he was also their only hope to save Adriana. They drove to the Ortega family's home around midnight. When they arrived, they found the house dark with no lights on. Roberto pounded on the door, calling Marco's name. No answer. "Maybe they've left," Beatrice said, desperate. "Maybe." The door slowly opened. Marco stood there, face pale and tired. He looked at them, surprise evident on his face. "Marco," Roberto said, voice breaking with emotion. "We need help. It's taken Adriana." Marco looked at them for a long moment, then nodded. "I know, I can feel it. Come in." They followed him into the house. There they met Claudia, Marco's mother, along with an elderly man in robes, a priest, though not Father Martin. "This is Father Antonio," Marco introduced. "He knows about these things. He helped us before." Father Antonio looked at them with old but sharp eyes. "You've brought it to your home," he said. "The doll, Pepito." Beatrice nodded, too exhausted and frightened to be surprised at how he knew. "It's possessed our daughter," Roberto said. "We need help. It says it wants a heart. A voluntary heart. Not what you might think." Father Antonio nodded gravely. "This entity, it's very ancient. It was once a child, very long ago, a child who was killed in a sacrificial ritual. But the ritual was interrupted and the child's soul could neither move on nor return. It was trapped, and over time it became different. It attached to the doll, and now it seeks what it feels it was denied, a heart given with love." "But how do we stop it?" Roberto asked. "How do we save Adriana?" "You cannot defeat it with force or with fear," Father Antonio said. "You can only confront it with unconditional love, willingness to sacrifice yourself for another. That's why it targets children. They are innocent and their love is pure." "If we go back," Beatrice asked, "how do we save Adriana? How do we remove it from her?" "We need to perform a ritual," Father Antonio said. "A very ancient ritual. And we need one thing which I hope you still have." "What?" "A photograph," Father Antonio said. "A photograph of Marco with the doll from when he was young. We need its real face, the face it showed Marco." Marco looked down. "Mom cut all those photos," he said. "Cut its face out of each one." Father Antonio nodded heavily. "I feared that. Then we must do it the harder way." They returned to the Fuentes house before dawn, with Father Antonio and Marco accompanying them. Claudia stayed behind to care for Elena, who had collapsed from fear and fallen asleep. The house was silent when they arrived. The front door stood open as if Adriana, or the entity inside her, was expecting them. "Remember," Father Antonio said as they stood before the door, "don't attack it, don't show fear. Only love can save the girl." They entered the house. The lights in the living room were on, and sitting on the sofa was Adriana, or whatever was using her body. She sat unnaturally straight with an unnatural posture, and her completely black eyes followed them as they entered. "Ah," she said in a voice not her own, "you've returned, and you've brought a priest, and Marco. Good to see you again, Marco." "Give Adriana back to us," Roberto demanded, trying to keep his voice steady. "Adriana willingly gave me control," the entity said. "She loves Marco very much, you know, and she was hurt when you separated them. She would do anything to be with him again, even if that meant giving up her body." "That's a lie," Father Antonio said, his voice calm but powerful. "You exploited her pain, her love. But you cannot take what is not freely given." "And who says it wasn't freely given?" The entity laughed, a metallic sound, reminiscent of chains dragging across concrete. "She opened her heart to me. She allowed me in. Just like Marco did so long ago." Marco stepped forward. "I was a child," he said. "I was tricked, but Adriana isn't. She knows what you are, and she will fight you." The entity stood up with a jerky, unnatural movement. "Perhaps you should ask her," it suggested. And suddenly Adriana's face changed. The black eyes disappeared, replaced by her normal brown eyes filled with tears. "Marco!" she cried. "Help me!" Marco moved toward her, but Father Antonio held him back. "Careful," he warned. "It could be a trap." "No," Marco said, pulling away from him. "It's her. I know it's her." He went to Adriana and embraced her. "I'm here," he whispered. "I'm here with you." The moment he embraced her, Adriana's body convulsed and her eyes turned black again. An arm shot up and Marco flew backward, hitting the wall with a force that couldn't have come from a normal girl. "Marco!" Roberto shouted, rushing to him. Father Antonio stepped forward, confronting the entity. "Gabriel," he said, his voice full of authority. "I know you. I know who and what you are." The entity frowned. The way Adriana's face twisted was horrific. "You know nothing about me, old priest." "I know you were once a child," Father Antonio continued. "An innocent child killed in a ritual. I know you were trapped, unable to move on, unable to return. I know you were betrayed by those who should have loved you." The entity took a step back, Adriana's face now almost afraid. "How do you know that?" she whispered. "Because that is what happens to all victims of that ritual," Father Antonio said. "Innocent children sacrificed in the name of power. But you're not one of them anymore, are you? You've become something else, something that does the same thing, betrays children's trust, takes away their innocence, eats their hearts." "No!" the entity screamed, and the room shook. "I am not like them. I am not a murderer. I just want... "A heart," Marco said, standing up with Roberto's help. "A voluntary heart. You want love." "Yes," the entity whispered. "Love, warmth, acceptance, things I never had." "Then let Adriana go," Beatrice pleaded, tears streaming down her face. "She's just a child like you once were. She deserves a life." "And I don't," the entity roared, and a sudden wind swept through the room, blowing objects and breaking glass. "I don't deserve it. I had my life stolen. I was betrayed. I was killed." "And now you're doing the same to others," Father Antonio said, not flinching before the entity's rage. "You're becoming what you hate." The entity paused, the wind dying down. Adriana's face twisted with pain and realization. I don't want to be that," she whispered. "I just want to feel love again." "You can have love," Marco said, stepping closer. "But not this way, not by taking it. Love must be freely given." "Who would give love to me?" the entity asked, its voice now closer to that of a child. "Who would love something like me?" "I would," Marco said, stepping even closer. "I understand how you feel. I know what it's like to feel abandoned, to be hurt. I lost my father when I was very young. I felt alone. I felt angry. But I found love from my mother, from my family, and now from Adriana. And if you let her go, if you stop hurting others, I promise that I won't forget you. I will pray for you. I will remember you. That's a kind of love, isn't it?" The entity was silent for a long moment. Finally, Adriana's face softened, and a tear, a real tear, rolled down her cheek. "I had forgotten what love feels like," it whispered. "It's been so long." "Let Adriana go," Marco said gently, "and I promise I will remember you. I will help you find peace." A deep sigh escaped Adriana's mouth, and suddenly black smoke poured out from her mouth, curling up to the ceiling. Adriana collapsed, and Beatrice rushed to catch her. The black smoke swirled in the air for a moment, then began to condense, forming the shape of a child, a boy about 10 years old with dark hair and sad eyes. "Thank you," the boy said, his voice childlike, no longer metallic or echoing. "Thank you for remembering me." "What's your name?" Marco asked, looking up at the shadowy form. "Your real name?" The boy smiled, a sad but genuine smile. "Gabriel," he said. "My name is Gabriel." "Gabriel," Marco repeated. "I will remember you, Gabriel, I promise." The boy's form began to fade, becoming more transparent. "Goodbye," he whispered. "Goodbye." And then he vanished completely, leaving only a sense of relief and a fleeting feeling of peace in the room. Adriana woke in her mother's arms, confused but unharmed. She didn't remember much about the time she was possessed, only a deep, cold feeling and infinite sadness. Father Antonio performed a short blessing ceremony for the house, assuring them that the entity Gabriel had truly departed. "The boy has found peace," he told them. "After all those years of suffering, he finally found what he truly sought, not a heart to eat, but a heart to remember him." As dawn broke, Father Antonio and Marco prepared to leave. Roberto and Beatrice, still stunned but immensely grateful, showed them to the door. "Marco," Beatrice said, taking his hand, "I'm sorry. I was wrong to blame you. You saved our daughter." Marco smiled. "I only did what anyone would do." "No, not anyone," Roberto said, patting his shoulder. "You're special, Marco, and you're always welcome here." As Marco and Father Antonio left, the Fuentes family embraced each other in the morning sunlight. They had been through hell, but they had survived. They still had each other. "How do we go on after all this?" Beatrice wondered, looking at their house, the house they had feared for so many days. "One day at a time," Roberto answered, holding his wife and daughter tight. "We'll heal, we'll overcome together." They went inside, ready to begin the long healing process. They didn't notice their 3 cats still staring at the roof, with a small shadow sitting there, a shadow that looked like a doll with a hat with jingling bells. "Goodbye, Gabriel," a small voice whispered from Javier's empty room. "Goodbye, old friend. But don't worry, I'll never forget you, and I'll continue our work. Because you weren't the only doll in that house, were you? And I'm still hungry."